In this video, I want to cover a scientific paper, and I've mentioned it in other videos, but I want to go a little bit more in depth and keep this short at the same time. And the reason people may have missed this paper as far as how much it can illuminate the workings of the mind is simply because of the title. It's something like prevalence-induced concept change in human judgments, and it doesn't really tell you that it's about how the mind works and how the mind keeps us unhappy. So there are a number of studies, but I'm going to keep this short and just give you the gist of it. In each study, subjects had a target, and so in the first one, they had to pick out a blue dot, and the dots were set up so they would change from purple to blue. So there's a number of them that were part of the study, but subjects had to pick out the most clear example of blue. And about halfway through, they just stopped showing the blue dot, and you'd expect subjects to stop responding. But that's not what happened. They changed their concept of what blue is, and they started responding to the purple dots. Okay, well, maybe that's just color processing or something. So they had another study where they had threatening faces, and they would go from totally non-threatening to quite threatening, and you had to pick out the very threatening face. And then once they stopped showing the threatening face, people changed their concept of what a threatening face is. So they started responding to something that previously was not a threatening face. They had redefined the problem. In another study, they would give people reviews of a study that was proposed, and you had to play this ethical reviewer, and you had to catch any big ethical flaws in the study. And they threw out some really big ethical problems, but then they took the ethical problems away. And again, just like the other studies, subjects changed their concept of what an ethical problem was, whereas before, this wasn't an ethical problem. Now they needed some kind of target. They needed some kind of problem to find. And so they redefined something that wasn't a problem as a problem. Now, a really cool part of the study is that they told people about this in different parts. They said, look, we're going to stop showing you the target. It had no effect. Then they said, well, let's just try to pay people to be accurate, because that would be really motivating if I just paid you for your accuracy. Again, no effect. And that's because the mind is so resistant to, it's like a computer program. So, I can go in and try as much as I want to reprogram Windows, and it's set in its ways. And unless I recognize that that program isn't who I am, I'm going to be continuously confined to its programming. And one of the things that we can learn from this is how important it is to put the mind under the microscope. So it's very similar to self-inquiry. So Ramana Maharshi, the way he would say, you need to ask who is asking the question. You need to start from the position of the I statement. And so when you're looking for a problem, who is it that's looking for a problem? And of course, when you start figuring out the intricacies and the mechanics of the mind and how the mind shifts the definition of what a problem is, you can really start to get a feel that none of this is who you are. I really like Romano. He gave an example how the mind is an unwanted guest. And it gets away with it because it just goes unquestioned. And he said, imagine if a stranger showed up at a wedding party, and the groom's side would assume that this person was invited by the bride's side, and the bride's side would assume person was invited by the groom's side. And so just because you show up, people assume, well, someone must have invited you. And to some extent, that's how the mind gets away with it. It's there, it's doing its processes, it's creating unhappiness, it's finding problems where there were none, and without questioning it, without putting the mind under the microscope and really figuring out its mechanics, where it comes from, its true nature, then we'll continuously try to find problems that don't exist.